Sign that it is now recording. Here we go. Right, welcome. Thank you very much to everyone who's turned up today. I know that you've all got lots going on. I know you're all busy. We will keep this to the half an hour. It'll be 12:30 till about 1 o'clock. The main aim is to go through three things. Number one, to discuss some of the key changes that are coming up or that we know are certainly coming up in this first month or two of 2025 for CQC. Secondly, we're going to look at the different reports. So we have had a lot of reports published literally over the last few days. The 9th to 13th of January, there have been a little flurry of CQC reports being published. Some of those are from what I call the old new reports. So these are the reports that included the evidence category scores and were much longer form. But a few of them have been published that have much briefer and a slightly different style of CQC reports. And we're comparing those and just explaining what that means for you, what that means for your report, and hopefully what that means in terms of the frequency of inspections too. And then finally, at the end, I'm going to do a little shout out to Providers Unite, which is a really great kind of movement that is growing at the moment. It's some really exciting stuff that I would love you all to connect with and get involved with. So those are the focuses for today. I haven't got a big PowerPoint. Simple reason being, it's a bit more discussive, this particular topic, and the main focus is on looking through those reports in a short while. So what are some of the key things that are going on in 2025? Well, as we know, we have the new chief executive, Sir Julian Hartley. He has kind of hit the ground running. He's outlined how he's going to be implementing various things from the two reviews that were done and that were, pretty blunt, shall we say, a few months ago around where social care needs to change and where the framework and the rollout of the framework has not worked. A few key things that are being worked on as we speak. A new relationship management process is being piloted. One of the things that has been most contentious and most that has caused some of the biggest upset with the framework was the fact that the manager role, the relationship between the manager and the CQC inspector kind of felt broken as they moved into different models of how inspectors could look after much more services over much larger geographical areas. There was some discussion about linking it to their expertise, which had some validity, but the problem that was faced was it meant that for most service providers, not all, but for most care service providers, they didn't actually have a named contact anymore. And over the course of that year, that caused a lot of headaches for CQC, but more importantly, it caused a lot of headaches for us as service providers, as managers. So what CQC are now very overtly and clearly working through is how do we bring back the named inspector? How do we have a much clearer, much tighter relationship process between services and the manager? And I think they're trying to do two things here. They want to make sure that it's localized so that people have, CQC inspectors that are, reasonably localized. You don't want to, if you're a service, in Carlisle, you don't want to have a CQC inspector contact that's in London. That's not going to work. But equally, they want to make sure that as well as it being geographically connected, that there's also some commonality in terms of making sure that that inspector has a good level of experience within your sector. Now, the key barrier to this, let's be really blunt, the key barrier to everything I'm going to talk through today is staff. CQC need more people. In fact, every email you get from CQC now, and you'll notice it because I went through them all, every email you get now from CQC that's kind of like a public announcement has a whole section on come and join us, be one of our team, and good for them. But this is one of the big challenges CQC are trying to sort out. If we want to have that relationship management process, if we want to have more frequent inspections, if we want to be able to write more reports, we need to make sure that we have a wider body. And when I say we, I'm not part of CQC, but that's the discussions CQC are having. There's some discussion around paying conditions and how that would enhance. But also, I think one of the challenges, and I think CQC recognize this, one of the challenges we have with CQC is that the typical route into CQC is a service manager who goes, oh, I'm sick of this. Maybe I'll go and work for CQC. And I think as a pool, that is a very small pool within a very small pool. So I think CQC are also, having to think through how can we attract a wider body of talent? How can we train people effectively for this role so we can have a wider and more diverse and more effective and better staffed team, particularly of inspectors and assessors. Obviously, the assessor role is kind of not called the assessor role. Again, they published the findings of an Ipsos Mori review that kind of went into detail about where that split between inspector and assessor kind of gone wrong, which is why they're not really called assessors now. And really, you kind of got inspectors and remote inspectors. Again, the remote inspector concept was supposed to kind of make things a bit easier, because if you've got staff that don't have to be geographically located, you can get through more stuff. Again, I think there's greater need to increase those numbers of staff, but there are some kind of murmurings around how those teams are structured too. But the headline for us is that CQC recognises that people want named inspectors, and they are actively piloting processes to get that in place. So that's a big, if we're thinking about what do we want to have over the coming months, and certainly by the end of the year, that CQC are promising us, number one is that named inspector and a better relationship management process than we've had over this past year. Number two, some of you may have seen the CQC webinar that I did, it must have been November time, where CQC had kind of amusingly on Halloween launched these key characteristics, which basically gave a breakdown of what should you expect for outstanding, good, RI, and inadequate for each quality statement. It was a big Word document, about 63 pages long. If you haven't found it, go into your emails, go back to Halloween. If you click on an email that CQC sent you on Halloween, there's a little blue link called Draft Key Characteristics. And within that, you've got this lovely big Word document that has all these breakdowns of what outstanding, good, RI, and inadequate looks like for each quality statement. If you're not sure where that is, get in touch with me. I can email it through to you. Not a problem at all. But whilst that's been really helpful, one of the other things that CQC have promised us in these first few months is a sector-specific guidance handbook. So hopefully we will, and again, the emphasis was it would be reasonably soon. Again, it is CQC, so we shall see. But the hope is perhaps in the next couple of months, we will have that guidance book. That guidance book will give us a little bit more clarity on what's needed for each of the quality statements, how we can prepare, what CQC are planning to consider. Now, I think another really interesting one that I think is going to cause it's going to cause a bit of a mind shift, is CQC are also trying to discuss how many quality statements are needed to give a rating for a key question. Let me give you an example. Let's take the key question SAFE. SAFE has 8 quality statements. So if you were going to do an absolute mega safe full assessment, you would look at all 8 of those quality statements, and that would give you your score. Now, previously, what CQC had done was they were taking your old scores and using those to populate any quality statements that they hadn't assessed. Everyone kicked off. That wasn't very popular. That was chucked in the bin. So now CQC are stuck with a new headache. Do we assess services completely ward to board, full mega assessment? Every single one of those 34 quality statements has to be assessed? Or is there a way that we can have kind of a minimum number of quality statements in each key question that can generate at least a rating for that key question? Let me give you an example. SAFE has 8 quality statements. These numbers are just coming from my head. CQC may land on different numbers. Let's say CQC say to assess SAFE, we have to look at least 5 of those 8 with a minimum of these, with these specific 2, for example, safe environments and safeguarding, must be one of those 5. I'm not saying that that's exactly what they're landing on, that that's specifically the decision they're making, but what they are currently trying to think through is, okay, if we make every service have all 34 quality statements assessed every time, we are going to have ongoing issues in terms of our rate of assessments and in terms of services really feeling the pressure because everything's being assessed. Is there a way that we can have a set minimum number of quality statements for each key question that is assessed to get that key question rating? What they used to do, and by used to, I mean this last year, they were using your old report. So if you got a good in SAFE, then all of the quality statements that they didn't assess within SAFE, they would use your old score. They'd take your good from your last report and ping it over to this report. That was widely panned. People did not like that for various reasons, justifiable reasons. So CQC are now thinking, is there a way that we can create a set number of quality statements for each key question? And as long as we do a minimum of that number, we can confidently say the rating for that key question is X. So it might be that out of the 8 quality statements for safe, they do a minimum of 4 to get you your safe rating. Or for caring, where there's 5, they'll do a minimum of 3 to give you a caring rating. What CQC are trying to do here is they're trying to go, can we avoid doing every single quality statement every time? Because it's incredibly stressful for providers, but also it adds to the time, it adds to the process of doing these assessments, doing these reports. And so I think there's a bit of a trade-off there. And how do we balance detail with time? And again, please don't shoot the messenger. This is not a me thing. This is not something that I'm saying, but it's one of the things that CQC are discussing now is to what extent can we look at a smaller number of quality statements to arrive at a rating for each of the key questions. We'll have to see how those details unfold over the coming weeks and months. Now, the other thing I'm going to show you in a moment is how the reports have changed slightly. One thing that's really interesting, if you go on the CQC website now, and it's something that I noticed literally last night when I was, I'm going to say I have a boring life, and I was Googling it, and I was on the CQC's website. One of the things that pops up, and it hasn't popped up now because I've closed it, but one of the things that pops up is essentially a little question saying, how regularly do you think we should assess? And it goes through each of the service types. CQC are very openly gaining and trying to gain as much feedback on how regularly should services be assessed. My personal view, and again, it might not be perfect, and it is just my personal view. My personal view is we need it to be at least every 3 years. I'd love it to be every 2 years. I'd love it to be every year. But I think every year would, A, be incredibly stressful for us as services, and B, CQC doesn't have the capacity. But I think if services were assessed every 3 years, minimum, ideally every 2 years, I think that would be a fair expectation. At the moment, we've got services that have got 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So do go on the CQC website. Do fill out that little question because they really genuinely want that feedback so they can start to create a realistic model that meets the sector's expectations in terms of how regularly those conversations are happening. I'll tell you what I'm going to try and do later on. I'll see if I can go onto the CQC website and just show you it popping up. Right, what I'm going to look at in a moment is 2 services whose reports were published pretty much on the exact same day. One is using what I call the old new report, and one is what I would call the new or the piloted reports. As you can see, everything all looks kind of similar as you would expect. We've got our usual kind of overall of the service and the people experience. And then if we go to the quality statements within each of the key questions, we can see we've got our ratings. But what you'll notice is there's quite a lot that's written. We've got quite a few paragraphs. Look at safeguarding. My goodness. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs for that one. Involving people to manage risks. Again, another 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs for this one. And what CQC have been doing is they've been kind of structuring those paragraphs around each evidence category. And you can see it, you know, we've got people's experiences here. Then there'd often be a kind of a section in relation to the manager and the staff, which is that feedback from staff and leaders feedback. Then there would be kind of a paragraph, in this case, around what was being observed and observations. And then there'd be something around the processes. So they kind of had a little write-up for each evidence category for each quality statement. Now you do the maths. 4 evidence categories, or 3 or 4 times 34 quality statements equals a lot of paragraphs. And actually, you know, I was looking at some of the reports that were published on the 9th of January, 10th of January. Some of these reports were from inspections in May. So May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January. It was taking 6, 7, 8, sometimes even 9 months. And the argument CQC have made is that the level of detail in these reports, you know, all of this writing is causing that delay in reports to be published. So what I'm about to show you now is the new report. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you. It's not some big, complete redesign. We're not rewriting and redesigning the wheel. But there are a few key little tweaks. So again, it all starts at the same as usual. You can see you've got the ratings for each key question. You can see it's in HTML. The first thing to note is that the view of the service, the people's experiences, that has stayed the same. The change has come within the write-ups for the quality statements. As you can see, it has gone from being 3 or 4 paragraphs to to 1. And if we had a look at the average length of each paragraph, the average length of these paragraphs is about 4 sentences. Some a bit less, so this one's 3, some a bit more, some of them are kind of 5 or 6. So what they're trying to do here is they're trying to give a much shorter snapshot of the service. Obviously, you've got your score, you've got your rating. I'm going to have a little read of this one here. The service had a proactive and positive culture of safety based on openness and honesty. There are processes in place for reporting accidents and incidents. Although there'd been no incidents at the service, the register manager was aware of procedures to follow and told us how they work to ensure a supportive reporting culture. They added, "We don't have a culture of blame, and I want a culture of openness where we are able to discuss an incident and learn from it. Staff told us they were confident the register manager will be supportive and take necessary action." So really, we are looking at a very quick snapshot, couple of sentences. Again, that was actually a slightly longer one. If you look at safe systems and pathways and transitions, it's much shorter. It's literally 3 sentences. One thing that we've seen when we look through some of these over the last few days is sometimes the phrase, "for example," comes up quite a lot. And what they're typically doing is they're basically giving a 1 or 2 sentence summary and then 1 example. Typically, that example is used via the feedback. So they are quoting what people are saying, whether that be what residents are saying, what family are saying, what staff are saying. But what they are basically doing is summary, example. Summary, again, you've got one here, summary. So this is saying what the service is doing about infection control, and then example. This is what the staff have said about it and what's going on. Again, summary, examples. Here, samples of, etc., etc. So what I think is really important to bear in mind here is, again, there's no big changes to your experience of your assessment. There's no big changes to the quality statements, the key questions, to the content of the report. But what we are seeing is CQC are being much more direct, much more succinct with their write-up. This becomes important for 2 reasons. One of the things that I think CQC are starting to consider is, who are we for? If we are a regulator for the public, then actually a score between 1 and 4 and 2 or 3 sentences is enough. Because actually, my dad's 77. If I wanted to make a decision about, the support my father needs, this is enough for me. This is way too much. This is too much, especially if there's 34 of them to go through. This was actually for you. This was useful for you as a service. This was useful for you to work out why they're given that rating, why they're written that, etc., etc. But what is CQC as a regulator for? If you compare it to, say, the NMC or other regulatory bodies, their job is to regulate, services for the public. And what we are seeing here with this much more condensed write-up in comparison to the previous one is exactly what the public would need. A 2-sentence summary and an example, typically from the mouth of someone who is connected to the service. That, plus a score between 1 and 4, is ample information. What I think it raises a question of is, what is the CQC's responsibility to you in terms of quality improvement? And I think where CQC have possibly drifted over time, and this has been reflected in the longer reports, and perhaps is something that's changing now now in 2025 as they focus on, okay, what is our job here? How can we ensure we do good regulation? How can we ensure that we regulate more services at a better quality? Is they're recognizing that actually perhaps the whole service improvement, working with you to improve, etc., 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 giving you all the information about absolutely everything, maybe that is an overstep. Perhaps as a regulator, like the NMC, like other regulators, our job is to provide an independent voice for the public to assess their service, which means that actually there isn't lots of info on all the things that you need to do and all the things you might need to change and tweak. Because the argument would be, perhaps that's not what CQC are for. They are there to regulate and to provide, and we would hope, independent public voice for the public to gain an understanding of where these services are currently at. So again, do have a look on the CQC website, have a look at some of these latest reports. You will quickly be able to see the difference in terms of the write-up and the structure of these newer ones. Let's be really blunt. The reason CQC are doing this is for one reason and one reason only. How can we assess more services? If you do the numbers on last year, it would take an age. It would take many, 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 many years to assess every service once. And one of the things that CQC said about this was because we were scoring every single individual evidence category, and because we were writing blooming paragraphs upon paragraphs for each quality statement, it was slowing us down. So by getting rid of the individual evidence category scores, that went in the bin on, I think, the 4th or the 2nd of December last year. And by piloting these new approaches, these new reports that have essentially 3 or 4 sentences per quality statement, we intend, CQC are saying, to undertake more assessments. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating. So a big thing I want to say to us as we kind of keep an eye on and kind of assess the quality of our regulator is, does it have the impact they said? If the whole point of binning the evidence category scores, if the whole point of making these reports much more succinct and, let's be blunt, much less informative for us as suppliers, if the intention of that is to increase the number of assessments, then let's keep a blooming good eye on the number of assessments. Obviously, we at Care Research will be keeping an eye on that as we do. The other thing that CQC have said is that this will enable the reports to come through quicker. Now, credit where credit is due. Looking at some of these reports, we have seen that the inspections were done early December and the report is out early January. Whereas some of the older reports, the ones that we have here, we have seen that those reports were done and inspections were done sometimes as early as May, sometimes later, kind of August, September, October, but were published on that same day as these briefer ones. So if they manage to maintain that kind of that progress, that kind of energy, then yes, there is some signs that these reports are coming out much quicker than these reports. And that makes sense, because if you've got to write 4 paragraphs for each of these, it's going to take you longer than writing 1 paragraph. So that's kind of the things to keep an eye out for. We've got the relationship management, kind of the bringing back the named inspector. We've got the handbook that will be coming through, hopefully, to enable services to have a better understanding of what each quality statement means for their service type. We've also got this idea of, is there a minimum set of quality statements for each key question? So instead of doing all 8 for safe, maybe they can do 4 or 5 and use that to create a safe key questions score, so that, again, we don't have to do the whole lot, all 34 every time. CQC are also very openly asking, how regularly do you want to see us? If you go on the CQC website, it'll be the first thing that pops up on your screen, will be a little survey where they ask exactly that. How regularly do you think we should inspect hospitals? How regularly do you think we should inspect health and social care services? How regularly do you think we should inspect, etc., etc.? Well worth filling in, because they are genuinely trying to understand. And then, of course, the other big shift that I've been showing you today is the difference in the reports. We have gone from 4-ish, 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs per quality statement to a very simple paragraph of about 4 sentences. The first one sets out where the service is. The second half of the paragraph typically illustrates either with an example or with a quote. The intention there being increasing the number of assessments and ensuring that reports come out quicker. Last little shout out, I want to shout out the work of people like Nadra Ahmed, and I believe Kat Hall as well has been leading on this. Providers Unite. I'm not directly associated or affiliated, though I have signed up and I do support it and I am very much a member. Providers Unite is I'll just read it out so I don't misquote them, a grassroots coalition uniting community care and support providers across the UK to advocate for our sector's survival. Says at the bottom there, together we deliver essential community care and support services valued at £68.1 billion, highlighting the critical role we play in the well-being of our communities and the nation's economies. There's lots of messages that are being kind of thought through around Providers Unite. I think one of the central ones is challenging the increase in national insurance for social care. I think that's a major central tenet that Providers Unite is critiquing. It's not just a little love-in. There is action being planned. There are events being planned. There are potential protests being planned outside government on key days when ministers are in. It is a very active group, and to put it bluntly, stuff is kicking off. Things are going on. So if you want to have an opportunity to be part of something bigger where care providers are openly saying to government, enough is enough, particularly on some of these issues like the NI rise, Providers Unite is a great group to be a part of. Go on providersunite.co.uk and fill in the information to get your email added, so they can send you information. There is also a WhatsApp group. The WhatsApp group, don't worry, you're not going to get 100 messages a day spammed. It's organized very, very well, but it tells you when the events that they're planning are going to be occurring. There's some Teams meetings. There's some opportunities to get involved, whether that's around social media, whether it's around speaking, whether it's around lobbying your MP. If you as a care provider are sitting there going, this national insurance thing is a nightmare, or our relationship with NHS is a nightmare, Providers Unite is a really good group of providers that are co-aligning. They are forming that coalition to have that voice, to get involved in that political protest, to get the seats around the table that are needed. And it's ran by Nadia Ahmed and a couple of other people in that team who are just brilliant. So that's just my little shout out. I'm not sponsored by them. There's no money involved. I'm not getting a secret check from Nadia. It's not a financial thing whatsoever. This is just me genuinely saying, this is an important thing if you care about these issues. And I would really recommend looking at Providers Unite, signing up and possibly joining the WhatsApp group too, because enough is enough, really, isn't it? I think we need to unite as providers and be heard. That is the end of today's session. I hope that's been useful. I hope I've given you a bit of an understanding of some of the things that are going on these first few months of the year around some of the changes. Had a look at the way those reports are now changing. Bear in mind, those reports were sent on the exact same day they were published, and you can see how those new report styles have changed. And then finally, a little shout out to Providers Unite for anyone who wants to become part of that movement to challenge government. That's it from me. I am officially done. I have to get a train to go from Leeds all the way back home to Kent. So I've got a lovely 5 hours sitting on a train, which I'm actually quite looking forward to be honest. I am around though, so feel free. You can leave now. You're not going to miss anything. If you do want to chat about anything, I am here. I will stop the recording now, but I am here if anyone wants to raise any questions. If you just wait, and then I can switch on your mics and so on and so forth. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll keep you updated when the next webinar will be.